And let's start with that thesis. I find it so interesting. There's a big distinction between news flow and activity, China's tech sector, and deployment of capital or finding capital to deploy elsewhere. Explain what you're arguing.
Yeah, so I think the reason why we mention it is because I think the investor interest, especially for those from the U.S. And Europe, so outside of Asia, and even for those that we speak to in Asia, they're based in Asia. People have interest, but then somehow we know that they've been underweight China Internet specifically. Or even to many that investors that share with us, they're actually using internet as a source of fund, obviously to fund their hardware trade in Korea, in Taiwan, and Japan. Partly because I think despite internet, for example, Alibaba, Baidu, they have full stack of AI. But then because of their core business are not really doing as well, they've been investing aggressively on food delivery, for example. They've been dragging the profit. So a lot of investors give us the feedback is that why should I bother so much of that while I have to deal with the core business? It is not a pure play, and I must well just play directly into some of the hardware name. So that's why this has been happening, and we've seen the last few months, China internet sector has not been performing, despite the valuation is actually getting quite attractive.
Right, Alicia, the story of the first half of this year was Chinese internet giants and frontier labs moving very quickly to try to close the gap with American technology companies. Does your research show that that gap is closing?
Yes, I think indeed, especially, for example, take, Alibaba Quant model, since 3.5 and then 3.6, 3.7 now, we're actually seeing there's a huge step up in terms of the model intelligence. And then same thing for, the independent lab, for example, Minimax that we cover. And also, I think Tencent, the latest model, Hunyuan 3 that they released at the end of April, this is also increasingly closing the gap with the frontier model.
The story and the data that we track in the US is capital expenditures on the hyperscaler side, and then how real is the agentic AI deployment on the enterprise side. Mm-hmm. Take that story to China. How is that playing out in that market?
So I think from the capex point of view, I think many of us are aware that I think China side is not spending as as high as what the U.S. Hyperscaler is indicating. Partly, I think there's a lot of cost components is cheaper, right, in China. Partly, I think there's also some of the existing capacities that is already built up last few years that is actually able to support it. And then in terms of the agentic, right, the future agentic workflow, we think that Alibaba is trying in terms of the Quant versus their existing, application, for example, the Taobao, the AMAP. But then I think over time, we do hope that Tencent, at the end of the day, could actually come up with their AI agents inside WeChat, which they are obviously testing on it. And then with the next versions of the model, if it's intelligent enough, because I think they're going to train a lot of their proprietary data into the next versions of the model. And then hopefully that could actually ensure the AI agents also working within the WeChat ecosystem.
Another big story overnight from China was Ant Group basically planning to overhaul the Alipay super app, but to bring in an agentic AI user face. You brilliantly set out kind of what's happened 1H 2026. What does Citi think happens in China's tech sector in the second half of this year?
So we hope that, for example, company like Tencent or even, and to some extent, some of these super app, that if they're actually able to bring up the agentic workflow working within the super app, which allow a lot of the enterprise that have mini program, for example, they're able to use agents within their ecosystem, then most of these enterprise would be able to stay within their ecosystem in a way, then hopefully, things could take off, especially for the super app environment, that they can become the AI power ecosystem that we are looking for, and hopefully that could help to re-rate, the leader like Tencent or Alibaba, then in that sense to help the entire sector to get the fund flow rotation back.